Hello, and welcome to the sixth and final episode of this year's Digital Government Excellence Symposium, presented by Payit. My name is Adam Jensen, and I'm a Senior Solutions Consultant here at Payit. I'm sure I'm biased, but I can't think of any better place to kick off this webinar than here, surrounded by the beautiful fall colors of New England. I've spent most of my life in the Northeast, so today's episode is special to me, as one of the guests joining us is fellow New Englander, Molly Smith, the treasurer for the city of Quincy, Massachusetts. Now, Quincy is known as the City of Presidents, having been the birthplace of 2 U.S. presidents. But since tomorrow's Halloween, I'd like to share a fun and spooky fact. Right outside of City Hall in Molly's office is Hancock Cemetery, the original burial place of Presidents John Adams and John Quincy Adams. Oh, and I mean reach outside and touch a headstone close. Imagine serving the people with the ghosts of founding fathers looking over your shoulder. While I can't promise any ghosts will join us today, we will dive into a webinar topic just as exciting. Go big or go home, driving digital adoption of government services. Imagine a world where digital isn't just an option, but the default way your residents access services and make payments. Our panel today will dive into how governments can drive this transformation and leave you with actionable steps to boost digital adoption for your own residents. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Kelly Davis-Fellner, Payit's Chief Marketing Officer and our Chief Resident Adoption Expert. Kelly, the floor is yours.
It is fantastic to be here, and thank you all for making time for us to join us for the webinar today. We have an awesome group of panelists who are going to lead us in a great dialogue about how do you drive a digital adoption or adoption of digital government services. And over at Payit, we like to say, go big or go home, because we really align with our clients and with the community to set really, really big goals for digital government and then achieve them and even exceed them. So I'm absolutely delighted to introduce our panelists. We have Jessica Simmons, Molly Smith, and Josh Robertson with us. And what I'd love to do as just kind of a start is do a quick round of introductions. And maybe what we'll do is I'll start and then hand off to you, Jessica, and then over to you, Molly. And I have got kind of an interesting question. And that question is, what is the current digital government challenge that is keeping you up at night or that you're the most focused on in your role? So I'll start. I am the Chief Marketing Officer for Payit, and one of the biggest ways that I spend my time is working with our client organizations in state and local government agencies to help them communicate with their community about the digital government services that they offer, and to help people have the confidence to try digital channels and then continue to stay in the digital channel. And so we do all kinds of things, communications programs with our clients, advertising campaigns, we design logos with them, all kinds of stuff. And my team kind of partners really closely with our clients around how do you actually really persuade people to give digital channels a try. So, Jessica, will you take off from here?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Jessica Simmons, and I serve as the Deputy CIO at the Georgia Technology Authority, and also as the Executive Director of the Georgia Broadband Program. And really kind of in my role, what we're looking at is, first of all, from a broadband perspective, just access. One of the big things that, most states are working on right now are very large grant programs to expand access throughout the country. And certainly something that we're working on here in Georgia. And so first, really what we're looking at is to make sure that citizens in our state have the opportunity to have the access to the infrastructure to then be able to participate with digital services. And then also more from kind of a GTA perspective, it is something at the state that we do work very actively with our state agencies to, try to make services available online, try to make them as easy as possible to use for constituents. And so, we're always looking at data and new strategies to make sure that it seems like constituents are actually finding things on websites or looking at usage, or if we need to move something on a website to, increase adoption of that particular service. And so we're really looking at it from all angles here of making sure that first the infrastructure is in place so that people can access government from really kind of any device that they have, but then also making sure that that the services are available from our state agencies as well.
That's awesome. Molly, how about you?
Yeah, I would say we're probably in a very similar boat. I think Quincy is on in the early planning stages of moving into a more digital world. I think the services that we provide right now are really bare bones. And so it's how do we allow our residents to get more access and have more abilities to go and pay their bill. No one wants to pay a tax bill. No one wants to pay a water sewer bill. It's how do we do it in a way that's easy, that encourages residents to do it effortlessly. So maybe it's an auto pay feature that we've turned on so you don't even have to think about it. I always kind of joke with our taxpayers. I live and breathe in the tax world. And so I think about taxes every day. Most residents are thinking about taxes 4 times a year in Massachusetts. Or if you're escrowing your taxes through your mortgage, you're not thinking about it ever. And so it's how do we, when that maybe that once a year opportunity comes up for you to look at your tax bill, how do we make it in a way that's really user friendly and digestible for the average resident?
Yeah, I don't like to think about my taxes ever.
I always joke. I get it. No one wants to talk to me. No one likes me. But that being said, it's how do we make it so that residents are educated about what we're doing and making it all, it sounds cheesy, but making it transparent, posting it up online and making it so that most people can go and access it. So that's what we're exploring right now.
Yeah, great. Well, let's dive in. Really looking forward to our dialogue. As we chat today, I am going to hopefully not bore everybody with too many slides, but we do have a few data points that we're going to share kind of, sprinkled in as we have our conversation. And I thought it would be useful to just talk a little bit about where this data comes from. So last October, we ran a survey and it was kind of a 2-stream survey. We polled 611 state and local government leaders. So some of these were folks with kind of an IT profile, and some of them were more sort of line of business leaders in agencies like, for example, a tax agency. And then in parallel to that, we also polled about 2,000 consumers, and it was both of these samples came from both the United States and Canada. So the government leaders were, kind of dispersed in both places and spread out both in terms of the different types of agencies that they came from, as well as geographically. And then the consumer sample that we're drawing from is nationally representative. So in terms of gender, geography, age, things like that as well. And so this data has given us some really interesting insights into kind of how people are thinking about digital government, both as end users, as well as kind of from that state and local government agency lens. So when we do present data during the dialogue today, that survey is sort of where all of this information, all of those facts are coming from. But before we dive into slideware and charts, what I would love to just talk a little bit about is, why does digital adoption matter? Like, why do we even care if digital government, why are we moving in that direction? And I would love, Molly, if you don't mind, maybe I'll put you on the spot to start first. And I would love to just kind of hear your point of view about why does this matter to you?
Yeah, so I think in my role, I have 2 functions. I am the tax collector for the city. So we're taking in property tax, water, sewer, motor vehicle excise, boat excise. But then I also serve as the treasurer for the city. So we're taking in the money and we're depositing it in our bank accounts. We're making sure bank accounts are being reconciled. So from a tax perspective and from a collector perspective, of course, I'm making sure that people are paying their taxes. And in 2024, the best way to do that is by offering an online presence and making sure that people can come on and easily pay. But then from a treasury perspective, if I have people coming in and paying in the window at City Hall, that's a higher likelihood that my clerks can fat finger a payment entry or a receipt, that they can make the wrong change. Maybe instead of giving someone back a $10 bill, they give them back a $100 bill. Accidents happen. So it's how do we adopt something and put something in place to minimize the human error that's possible in all of these transactions. So I think that's a big piece of it from where I sit.
Yeah. Jessica, what about from your point of view?
I mean, I think there's so many opportunities when, you're really able to completely, navigate the government space digitally. I think the biggest thing initially, and I think it's kind of a given, is just the amount of time constituents can save. If it's a process they're used to doing, it's something that's repeatable, that could be done very quickly. If it's an interaction that they would have, monthly, quarterly, yearly with an agency, also the ability to interface with multiple agencies very quickly. Think about, sitting here in front of our computers. If I had to, renew my annual registration with the Secretary of State's office, or I had to get a type of license, like a hunting and fishing license with the Department of Natural Resources, or I had to get a professional license with also the Secretary of State's office. How easily I can sit here and navigate all of that just from my computer versus, having to go in person to these various offices and have so many separate interactions. Just thinking about kind of the convenience and time. And again, to highlight the point also of accuracy of, the potential of getting better data across as well.
Yeah, it is interesting to think about. I'm curious what kind of feedback you've gotten from constituents, from both of your perspectives. We always think about there's this sort of two-sided set of benefits to digital government, right? There's lots of, Molly, you talked about security and efficiency value, right? It enables the agency to work harder. It reduces error, less manual processes, et cetera. And then obviously, constituents are increasingly having a pretty strong preference for digital channels just being easier, more convenient, et cetera. Have you guys gotten specific feedback from folks about these kinds of things, whether it's residents or even your stakeholders, Jessica, across the state of Georgia?
I mean, what I would say in general is just, I think it also gives from like an agency perspective, also allows for a lot of times our agencies to be able to process things faster. And so, not only does that make that agency more efficient, but then again, always kind of coming back to the point of trying to improve customer service and kind of citizen engagement with government. The faster and easier the process is, or the faster that, something could get, approved on the state side. And, I think really just improves kind of that interaction. And again, kind of as we're going to talk about today, kind of builds more of that trust of then wanting to go back and having that same type of interaction with government, or, thinking about expanding that of, well, I did this online and that was pretty easy with that agency. Why don't I see if this other agency has a similar process? And so then I can just kind of sit here and handle it all from my computer at home. But generally, I just think that the efficiency really from both sides has been a big benefit.
Yeah. Molly, anything you'd add there?
Yeah, I think to that point, we get a lot of feedback that it's so easy for me to go in and pay my cell phone bill, pay my internet bill online. Why is it so complicated for me to pay my tax bill? What are my tax dollars going to? So I think that's a huge piece of what we see is, how do we invest in technology in the right way to show our customers that, yes, we're using your money in a very smart and judicious way, and look what we have to show for it. You have this amazing online platform and we're making it that much easier. So I think that's a big piece of it too.
Yeah, for sure. I'll do my first little data dump here from our survey. So we asked people, hey, if you paid your government bills online and had a good experience, how likely would you be to do the following? And recommending the service to others is kind of the top ranked option there, and most kind of frequently cited. 71% of people said, oh yeah, I would definitely tell people about this. So it's kind of this, continually reinforcing mechanism, but it also drives trust in the government agency. People are even willing to share on social media, hey, I did this, I got in, I got out, it was super easy and quick, you should try it. I think one of the kind of funniest or most interesting ones was 1 in 3 would fully be ready to vote for the elected official again and reelect them based on this. And then the other note here is once you pay one thing online or have one interaction or transaction, this is not just for payments, it's being able to do any kind of business online. The expectation that you will be able to access other services or other payments online is very, very high. It's like, oh, I renewed my car with the DMV, my, license or my tags, what else can I do? And I think, Jessica, you're probably confronting that a lot just because of the, sort of broad footprint of the different interactions across all of the agencies that your organization touches. Does this resonate for you guys? Does this sound about right? Or have you seen other outcomes that, we didn't think to ask about?
No, I mean, I think this definitely is in line with what we're seeing. And again, the more and more people are able to do things online, they want to be able to do it all and have all of their government interactions online, or at least have the opportunity. And so I think that this definitely aligns with what we're seeing.
Yeah. Molly, any thoughts from you on that one?
Yeah, I think something that when I first took this job on that our mayor said to me was, most people are not interacting with their local government on a day-to-day basis. And so for some people throughout their lifetime, paying a bill could be their only interaction with their local government. And so that's really the takeaway for some residents, and right or wrong, that's what they're interpreting as the government as a whole. So that's a funny stat about the elected official being elected again. But it is true that maybe that's the taste in your mouth, for good or bad, about your government.
Yeah, it is an interesting one to think about. The other thing, we talk a lot about the digital front door to the government, and it is that sort of, many times it is the only impression that somebody has is what, their experience on a website or in a payment flow or, trying to access services in another way might be their only interaction. And so those do make lasting impressions for sure. Okay, let's see. Let's talk a little bit about on the agency side. So in our survey, we also said, okay, if you are either improving or implementing a digital channel, why are you doing it? And so we asked, essentially, what are your goals in doing this? And gave people a list and said, what are your highest motivators? The first place winner was a tie between saving my agency money and improving resident trust and satisfaction. So again, it's that two-sided, benefit of I need to operate more efficiently and keep within my budget, but then also, drive constituent satisfaction. Second and third place were collecting revenue faster and then making it easier to support customers. So if there is a question, being able to have kind of that digital paper trail, if there is such a thing, I guess that's kind of an oxymoron, but that digital record makes it a lot easier to then go in and say, oh, I see you actually overpaid against your bill, or, oh, it looks like, maybe you paid twice or things like that. And then being able to kind of solve their problem more quickly. They also, and I thought this was very interesting. We asked people, what do you think this is going to do for your team, right? Is this going to be a net positive as you get increasingly digital? Is it a net positive for folks who work in your organization? And there was very, very overwhelming positive response. This is sort of the, somewhat to very much improve engagement and satisfaction. And 83% of the respondents said they had positive expectations that the more modernization that they did and the more digital initiatives that they pursued, the kind of happier the workforce would be. I would love to just, what reactions do the two of you have to this? Does it resonate? And then particularly around some of that, like, how do your teams feel about it? And how is this improving things in a government workforce? Any observations you have there as well? And Molly, I'll tag you to go first on this one.
Yeah, no, you took the words out of my mouth because I was looking at that slide and I said, I might say fourth place / first place for me is how does my team function with this digital offering? And so if we're putting something on the back end and maybe to constituents, it looks great, but on the back end, it's being held together with duct tape. That's not helpful for my team either. And so how do we find something that works for both the residents and the people who are processing on the other end? So I think that's a huge piece of it.
Yeah, for sure.
I agree. I mean, we've seen things where, agencies have taken almost completely paper-based application processes and moved them online. And just thinking about what that really does for kind of the staff on the back end of obviously, just getting cleaner data coming across, obviously not having to do a lot of the kind of manual work or manual entry, or relying on OCR and maybe it doesn't come across correctly because it couldn't completely read someone's handwriting, to obviously getting better data in, which obviously helps them process things faster. And it just becomes I think a much smoother process to, for whatever interaction that may be, whether it's a payment, whether it's an application. I do think it makes it a lot easier for the staff.
Yeah, and I don't, not knowing your specific, kind of stats around this, but we see so much media coverage about there being a talent crunch in public sector, both on the side of technical jobs, but also just in terms of people to actually fill roles. You always see these stats. Oh, such and such county has 25% of its jobs are currently unfilled, or things like that. Are you guys suffering with talent crunch challenges specifically in your respective homes?
I feel like we're always looking for great employees. I think the state's very lucky to have a great workforce, but just kind of keeping a lot of those positions filled, especially in certain agencies, it is difficult. And the more that we can improve our processes and our systems to make it easier for them, obviously, we're going to have better retention. And but yeah, it is something, looking at the particular fields, obviously slightly less related to this, but obviously has a huge component on everything that we do as we digitize as, everything around security, and finding really the workforce around the cyber field is definitely difficult. But we're trying to partner with some other agencies and come up with strategies on ways we can work with local universities, the technical college system in Georgia, to try to develop more kind of internships and apprenticeships, so that, ultimately we are trying to, help bolster that particular sector. But we definitely are seeing definitely needs in certain areas for certain agencies.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, some of the needs are probably shifting from somebody to sit behind a window into, another security architect or engineer.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, I bet. Molly, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, I think we've been very lucky and very fortunate to have a great talent pool. So I'm not begging for people on my team. I think my challenge ends up being, if I have this great, amazing, talented staff, how do I keep them from getting bored? And we want to continue to improve and continue to modernize. And if I don't have the tools available for that individual to really take a great idea and run with it, then they're going to end up leaving on their own accord. To be honest, they're going to say, oh, this is just, I can be more impactful and do more, maybe somewhere else that has more technology. So I think that's my challenge.
Yeah. The retention dimension is certainly a consideration as well, for sure. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about going big and what that means to you guys. So, what goals, or like what, if you just, blew it out of the water this year for your specific goals, what would that look like? How do you guys think about that? How do you measure it? Jessica, I'm going to point this one in your direction first. But just like, how are you thinking about what great looks like?
Sure. So again, kind of success for us, I think, is kind of two-pronged, especially looking at kind of the access to connectivity, but then also the utilization and adoption of connectivity. First and kind of foremost for us, we, through the grant funds that are available right now and the current programs that the state has in flight, the goal is obviously to first get access, high-speed internet access, to all of the remaining unserved and underserved locations in the state of Georgia. We feel like we're well on that path with the commitments that Governor Kemp has made over the last couple of years. We currently have $660 million in flight for projects to be done by the end of 2026. And then with the upcoming program that we're implementing, the state of Georgia will be receiving over $1 billion to get to those remaining locations. And so I think that we're certainly well on our way of getting connectivity to those locations, which is obviously a huge accomplishment, but then also really, also working with our team to, really implement our digital connectivity plan as a state, where we're really more so working with constituents throughout the state of making sure that they understand all of the wonderful tools and resources that are going to be available to them with this additional connectivity. And a large part of that is their, access to government services and utilization of government services, digitally, rather than obviously feeling like they have to go into an office or potentially mail something in. And so I think our big goals are obviously getting the connectivity out there, which that's well underway, but then really making sure that we can do as much as we can, working with a lot of partners, nonprofits, local governments, making sure that constituents really understand all of the services that they're going to be able to access, and just ways that they can have easier interactions, or ways that they can kind of streamline the things that they need to do, with being able to obviously do everything digitally.
Yeah. Molly, how about you?
That's funny. I almost feel like a fraud a little bit being on this panel. So the city actually, don't go on our website. We have a horrific payment system right now. So that would be my big dream over the next 6 months to a year, is to implement a really nice payment feature. So we've been in conversations with Pay It, which is how we're here today. But it's, how do we get something where residents of all ages, all demographics, all information access levels go online and make their payments and be engaged too. It's not just go, I'm going to pay my bill. It's, I'm going to really interact with this bill. I'm going to understand it. Here's the other resources. Oh, this water bill looks a little high. It looks like there's a button right here to link me to the water department where I can ask a question about a leak. And so my dream, my pie in the sky, my going big would be to really implement something that's dynamic and interactive, where our residents can really go up a notch in how they're interacting with us from their couches, from their living rooms, maybe without coming into City Hall.
Yeah, we talk a lot about customer experience around payments. Obviously we are, a lot of what we do is kind of centered around a transaction or a bill payment, but it is that kind of how do you make it as easy as possible to use? How do you make it very trusted and very intuitive, no matter how kind of digitally savvy somebody is? And then also, I like the way you said, how do you actually like kind of interact with this bill, like really understand what is happening? And that is a very different way of thinking about it than, oh yeah, we have a way to pay online or things like that. So speaking of different people, this was a finding from the survey that we thought was, maybe a little bit surprising. You hear all the time that kind of, what I think of as now as a trope. As I get older myself, I think it's a trope that, older people can't use the internet. Our sample was very, very broadly representative in terms of the different age cohorts and the silent generation. So these are, the oldest folks that were in our sample had a 64% adoption rate in terms of whether or not they had actually completed a government transaction online. And then obviously, you see, millennials and Gen X kind of, really where that adoption is the highest. I think the explanation for Gen Z, so, people who are often described as digital natives, is really more a matter of they haven't had the need yet to do one, right? They just got maybe their first driver's license and aren't up for a renewal yet. They, paying property taxes is a pleasure that they have not yet experienced as one of the joys of home ownership, for example. But we found this really, kind of interesting. And I think as we think about that customer experience, we're like, how do you make this something that everybody can use? And, even above and beyond age, but people who have, maybe a disability and need some accessibility tooling in that platform or things like that, because we want it to be easier than certainly, getting out and going down to the office or going to the post office or things like that. Does this mirror kind of what you guys are seeing in terms of digital adoption, or do you guys have age groups or different, kind of demographic groups that you're focused on really trying to drive more adoption from or reach better? I imagine, Jessica, particularly as I think about some of that digital divide work, there's probably, rural communities or things like that you're addressing.
Absolutely. I think, again, more for us, I think it's more looking at kind of the various parts of the state that really don't have as good of access right now, because obviously if your access is lacking, then it's much more difficult to be able to engage the same way as, those constituents that live in communities where obviously they have, much better access and have been using these services for quite a long time. And so, often, it's in rural areas, but, we also have some very rural areas in Georgia that are also very well served and have been served for a long time. So it really just varies based on each of the different kind of communities and kind of what the kind of historical structure of kind of connectivity looks like in that community. If they've got, a small rural telephone company that got into fiber service a number of years ago, we actually have some of our most rural counties that are completely served when, we still actually have some unserved locations in Metro Atlanta. And so it's kind of, sometimes it's not exactly what you would think. But we definitely are taking kind of a multifaceted approach to make sure that we are looking at kind of all of the different opportunities where we can hopefully work with these communities to improve digital skills.
Molly, anything you'd add here?
Yeah, I think when I look at my community, I have a pretty large unbanked population. And so I'm trying to offer some kind of solution where maybe you don't have a bank account. You can still go online, look at your bill, get the balance of your bill. You may not pay it online, but you can use that as an information tool to get the status. And maybe then you come into City Hall, or I know a lot of online payment platforms offer Venmo, PayPal. You can go to a Walmart and pay your bill there. So I think there's a lot of different options for people. And so it's really understanding your community, understanding all of the different people. And I think that's where I struggle with a little bit, is like paralysis by analysis. Is I want to help everybody. And how do I make sure that the payment system that we ultimately implement is going to work for a majority of our citizens? So I think having something that's really, it's fungible a little bit. And so you can mold it to be what you want it to be. And to, I forget who said it earlier, but when you get feedback from somebody, oh, we're going to move this on the website, we're going to change this button, we're going to mold this a little bit differently, it's getting that feedback from residents. So I think as I'm looking at demographics, that's what I'm more concerned about with my population is how do I make sure it's, because that's a surprising statistic, is that older adults are actually more internet savvy than I might have thought. So it's how do I help my unbanked population, I think, is my biggest concern.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to blow through a really quick kind of data review of some of the things that we have found about how do we help, drive end user adoption. And then I want to come back, because what I'd love to do as kind of a conclusion is to hear what advice you guys have for your peers. So I'll do my tips and tricks quickly and then let you guys take the floor once again. When we think about working with our client organizations, one of the things we encourage them to do is to address kind of all three of these stages in a customer journey, right? So they have to learn that they can pay online. And then they kind of go in this mode of, okay, well, do I want to? Is this the right thing for me? They might have questions. They might, want to know how easy or hard it is, how secure it is, things like that. And then they go and they give it a try. And then that's when you start getting those outcomes, like they want to do that again and they want to pay for other services online or things like that. So as we map along that journey, we kind of have specific advice or specific tips across each one of these stages. So obviously driving awareness is the first goal, right? And you might think, oh gosh, well, everybody's just going to Google it. They're going to figure it out, right? And while that is true, one of the, kind of things that we found was, 15% of people who had actually managed to pay online initially struggled to figure out kind of where to do it or how to, get to that part of the website or that experience. And then of, that same sample, 10%, 1 in 10 of them couldn't actually figure out how much they were supposed to pay or other information that they needed in order to complete the process. So with, stats like that in mind, it's important to just kind of signpost things and remind people, yeah, you can do this, and here is how. Let's point you in the right direction. We ask people where would you expect to see information about, paying things online and from a government agency. They're going to go to the website first. We have a client in the city of Grand Rapids who says, they looked at their web traffic and they discovered, I believe the stat was 80% of their traffic was to find a bill or pay a bill. And so, a huge amount of the traffic to a government agency's website is going to be seeking that kind of transaction or interaction or accessing services. We have also found, these are kind of rank ordered in terms of what we advise people to prioritize. And this is, again, based on these survey responses. So start with the website, put the information on the bill, make sure that you are, your website is search engine optimized. And so it is easy for folks to kind of find their way. And then on top of that, you layer on things like social media or advertising or direct mail pieces or things like that. But those foundational elements of make it easy to figure it out, Jessica, like you were talking about, make this adjustment on a website or things like that. Make it very, very easy. We always put QR codes on bills that go directly into the payment experience, doing things like that. So that helps kind of get the services top of mind. And then as they are entering that kind of consideration phase of like, okay, is this for me? Like, should I do this? We asked people about what are the things that give you confidence to proceed with a online interaction with digital government. Things being official. This is the official way to pay. This is, a service provided to me by the government agency. That is the most important thing. Security concerns definitely are still very prominent. I don't think that's ever going to change. And then obviously people want to know I can get in and get out and get on with my day, and it's quick and easy. We asked folks about, do you prefer to pay online? 79% of our respondents did. When people said they did not prefer to pay online or they did not intend to pay their next bill online, security concerns are the main cause of hesitation. So as you are communicating with residents about these things, we always advise, make sure you are really reinforcing that message of your data will stay private. We have the very best security protections in place. Your payment information is encrypted, et cetera. That's really not something you can over communicate about. It's really important to reinforce the secure nature of those government interactions. And then finally, once you've finally got them kind of giving it a go, we need them to have a great experience with it, right? We want them to kind of go through it. We want it to be very quick and easy and convenient. And we want them to say, oh yeah, this is great. I know I'm doing the right thing. I'm paying the right amount to the right people. I'm going to get my receipt, et cetera. The most important features are things like, yep, your payment went through. Here is your receipt. Just that kind of closing the loop of like, yes, you have completed payment. And then some of those advanced features like being able to schedule payments, getting reminders, setting up auto pay, understanding the components of a bill, things like that are also ways to drive, a better experience, that great customer experience. We also asked folks who had done digital government interactions, did you encounter any of these challenges? And almost 2/3 of people who had done that had encountered at least one of the challenges that we kind of had in a fairly lengthy list. And it was things like, kind of technical glitches, a process timing out, the user experience being kind of unintuitive and clunky. And those are kind of the places where some of that digital adoption can break down, right? If it ends up feeling like it's, nearly impossible to complete it, or it's not intuitive, or you're not quite sure you're doing it right, you're not getting that confirmation of the receipt, things like that, that kind of undermines their, confidence in the system, their trust in the system, and their willingness to kind of come back and try it again in the future. So that's kind of the inverse, those are the things you got to watch out for as you implement those. I would love to, if Molly and Jessica, if you guys have any reactions to some of the data I just shared, but more broadly, like what advice do you have for, your counterparts in other government organizations? What have you learned that you'd love to not have somebody else have to learn the hard way?
Just to jump in, I would say, kind of the two kind of focuses that I would put on it is, first think about the customer, think about the process that you would like and the experience you would like if you were going in to pay your bill or have an interaction with government, and make that as streamlined as possible, make it as intuitive as possible. I really agree with a lot of kind of the best practices that you just shared about, making sure that, you're closing the loop, that you actually, get the thank you for paying, and you maybe get an email receipt so that the transaction actually went through. I know I've paid things on websites in the past where you don't get that, and you're like, I wonder if that actually went through or not. And so then you end up calling the organization, and then that completely defeated the purpose for actually going online. And so, really just thinking about the customer. But then also, and as we've talked about a little bit as well, thinking about your staff and kind of processing on the other side as well. As you're looking to design something, getting their feedback, making sure that it's a process that, if they're processing either payments or applications or just whatever the interaction may be on a daily basis, they probably have some really good feedback on ways to kind of improve the process as you're looking to digitize or improve. And so, but I still think it's just really important to always be focused on kind of the customer mindset. And I think if you look at it, that you're the customer going in to have the interaction and what would make kind of the easiest path for you, then I think that would, definitely improve some of our websites and some of our systems.
Yeah. Molly, what about you?
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid to ask a lot of questions. I think I've been on calls with my poor Pay It representative, and it's an hour long, and I am asking every single question. So I think really learning the ins and outs of how this is going to work for you and your community. How are these files going to interact? How is my resident going to interact with different types of bills? Can they add multiple things to their cart? I think it's really getting into the nitty gritty, and don't be afraid to slow it down and really ask a lot of questions.
Yeah. Is there anything that either of you would share about something you did you did it really right? Like, oh, I'm so glad I did that. You're kind of saying that, Molly. You're like, I'm driving Pay It crazy with all my questions. But, anything else you would share of like, oh, I'm so glad I tackled this thing this way?
Yeah, I think, and like I said, I'm fortunate that I sit in two different roles, that I'm the treasurer and the collector. And so I sometimes put my collector hat on first and foremost, where I'm so focused on the residents and how they're paying, because that of course is the most important. But then sometimes I forget to put on my treasurer's hat too. And it's, once this money comes in, how are we reconciling this? So how are our bank accounts reconciling to the files? And so I think making sure that we're asking, hey, Pay It, can you send me what our bank reconciliation files are going to look like? Can you give me a sample? And so I think that's something that we've done really well, as we're slowly and methodically going through to make sure and see which offering and which product is the right one for us. We need to make sure it's the right one for both sides of the house from where I sit. So I think that's important.
Yeah. That two-sided, equation of, it's got to be awesome for residents, but if it's not awesome on the back end, you've kind of missed half the benefit, or is really important for folks to consider. Jessica, how about you? Any other?
Also, just say, pretty much with any big implementation, but we've seen it go really well and not so well, is just the really importance of really thorough testing, making sure something really works the way that you believe it's going to work before you roll it out. And then the more information that, obviously, if there's a new change or process, that you can kind of message that to constituents, maybe kind of a quick list of instructions on the website of what's changed or how to navigate it. Or we've seen a lot of success with like really short, but, tutorial videos where, that way you can kind of walk through a process. And so, lots of great improvements can be made as we digitize, but I think it's just important to make sure that it's rolled out the right way, that it's tested properly, that it's very, well communicated to constituents on how to use the service, but then just as importantly, that your staff is trained to be able to use the system on the other side as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of change management that has to happen, right? Yeah. Any parting thoughts for the audience or anything else you feel like we didn't cover that you'd like to share?
Maybe I'll jump in. I think something that I've been fortunate enough to see is how helpful all of these different so treasurers, collectors, finance managers are. So I've quite often just picked up the phone and cold called someone else in another state or another municipality to say, I can see that you're doing this online. How is this working for you? What are challenges that you've seen? So I would also encourage people, don't be shy about, give me a call if you have questions. And I think in my experience, I've seen a lot of people in my role or similar financial roles are more than happy to spend a couple minutes and walk through what their experience has been. So I think that's something that I might highlight for people to do.
Yeah. What about you, Jessica? Any parting thoughts?
I think it's great advice. I mean, I think kind of just from a broader perspective, obviously, because we work with all of the enterprise state agencies, is just any area that you can streamline, that you could make either a process more efficient, easier for your staff, easier for constituents. I think it's a win-win for everybody involved. And again, I think there's so many benefits. You get better data, things process faster. So it's a really great opportunity as we see more and more stuff come online.
Well, I'm so thankful to both of you for making time to talk with us today and being a part of this. And I feel like I learned a lot listening to both of you, and I know the audience will too. So thank you so much for being a part of the panel.
Yeah, thank you for having me.